Good morning. Good to see you this morning. Wasn't yesterday a great respite? If it doesn't rain, today's going to be similar. If it does rain, that's great, as long as it's not ice or snow. Charlotte and I went to Oklahoma City. My son's birthday was Friday, and we went and got his kids and took them and got a motel room so they could jump on the beds. And so Travis and Natalie could have a date night, and then we all met the next day and had lunch together. And so we had the kids for the weekend. It was fun. Our grandson Elliot, Travis's oldest, he's 8, 9-ish, and he has learned about idioms. He's a smart little kid. But he was teaching us over dinner about idioms, and I kept asking him, "Why are you talking about idiots?" Someone asked. "No, Grandpa, it's not an idiot, it's an idiom." And he taught us what they were and all of that. And so we were kind of pointing out idioms as we would say them. In English, there's a whole lot of idioms. And but he had shown us, they've moved since we were there last, and he was showing us where his school was. And we drove by it, and there in Mustang. And as we were driving through, and there was an elementary and there was a middle school behind it, and we drove through to look at all those, because where he goes to school is where Natalie, his mom, also teaches. And he was saying, it's got one more year, and then they're going to have to be separated. But as we drove by, I noticed a sign. So after we looked, I drove him around. I said, "Somewhere in this parking lot is an idiom, and I want you to find it." And he was looking and looking, and it was a sign. It was an instruction for parents that were lining up their cars to pick up kids. And he didn't find it. And so we stopped, and I said, "Look at the sign." And he did, and he read it. And I said, "No, what does it say?" It says, "Pull up to this point." And I was like, "What are you supposed to pull? And how does pulling up help you get to the sign?" And he was like, "That's awesome." It was exciting because he'd been talking about idioms, and that's one. And we don't think about those things. And it really, to me, it really illustrates awareness of language and understanding language. And it's the same with Scripture. Guys, it's great if you read through the Bible in a year, but it's important that you study it. And you can study it into whatever depth you want, but that was the issue with the Sadducees. They had read it and read it and read it and read it. They knew it, but they hadn't studied it. And so he was telling them, when God said, "I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob," you missed it because you weren't studious. You weren't looking at the significance of all of those words. And so much in this final week that he's talking about, it has to do with how well do you know what the Bible actually says. I want you to look with me at the end of chapter 12, where we had the 3 rounds, starting with the chief priests and the scribes and those, and then we had the Pharisees and Herodians come to Jesus, and they're all asking kind of their most controversial question. And certainly between the Pharisees and the Herodians, as we had talked about, they're on opposite ends about what to do with Caesar and what to do with money and paying taxes. Is that tribute? Is that a form of worship? And then we had the Sadducees come, and and then we have this lone scribe. And after the interaction with the scribe, if you remember, it says no one ventured to ask him any more questions. And the word can be translated risk, because they learned it's risky to ask this guy anything. Now understand, this is an opportunity for all of the Jewish leaders to come to Christ. This is an opportunity for them to come to God, because you've got someone who's giving them answers they don't understand, answers that are answering their questions, but they don't accept the answer. As we saw, what they do is they turn around and go and determine how to kill him. And so this one scribe comes up, and Jesus is going to say to him, you're not far from the kingdom. But how he deals with that, I want you to see. And I want to preempt that by saying sometimes we look at all the things that we give, or all the service that we give, or all of the desire that we have to give. And like with the rich young ruler, Jesus looked into him and saw the one thing he didn't give. And that's the difference between being a follower or a student or a friend or an adherent or whatever to Christ and being a disciple. It's whatever stands between you. And the same with Nicodemus. Nicodemus came to him in the night. He's covering his tracks politically and socially, etc. He came to him, and he was asking him about salvation. And Jesus said, if you want to be saved, you got to be born again. In his response, he was confused. And guys, remember, confusion is where learning begins. It's not having an answer to something that I need an answer to. And so when Jesus said, you must be born again, his response was, what, am I supposed to go back into my mother's womb? And that shows two things. One, I'm wrestling with this idea, but I'm coming up with my interpretation. The answer is, what do you mean? Teach me more. That's what a disciple does. That's what a student does. Rather than getting into, well, that's ridiculous. I can't go back into my mother's womb, which leads to rejection. It's just like in the wilderness, when after he'd fed the 5,000, he fed the 4,000, there was a group came and he said, if you want to be my disciples, you got to eat my body and drink my blood. See, it was discipleship tests. In a sense, what'll it take in discipleship to turn you away? And a lot of them left. In fact, he turned to the 12 and said, are you two going to go? And I love Peter's answer. Where can we go? You have the words of life. That doesn't mean I understand what you're saying, but I'm going to keep following you till I do. And that's he was a disciple. Not a follower, not a friend, not a social group. He was a disciple of Christ. And I understand he's older than Jesus. Very easy for him to get this age thing. And I think that's part of why he reprimanded him, is because I've got some experience in life you don't have because I'm older than you, that kind of thing. But boy, where can we go? There's nowhere else that we can get the words of life. So you're going to have to explain this to us. That's the response of a disciple. What we see in these folks is they grumble and leave. And their inability to deal with his reason is their defeat. That's why they get angry. But they don't have the character to say, like Gandhi said, don't raise your voice, improve your argument. It's not like, you know what, I want to get back to you on this. I'm going to go study up, and then I'm going to come back. Even if I'm coming back with ammunition to argue with you, I'm engaging this. And I'm struggling with it. And guys, please, do you understand in your own life that some of your growth in knowledge, etc., came when you first rejected a new idea that was presented to you? It was different than what you had always thought. It was different than what you believed. And it was presented to you, and your first thought was, that doesn't sound right. Let me go take a look at it. And then you come back eventually and say, you know what, that's right. I'd never seen it that way. I never understood it that way. That's what disciples do. It's not, well, that's not what I've been taught, so I'm just going to reject it. That's not what I have been taught or what I have come to the conclusion of, but I'm going to study this again, and I want to interact with you again until I find the error of what you're saying, and then I'm going to walk away, or et cetera. Okay. So this one scribe comes to him and says, what's the greatest commandment? And he answers and said, an incredible statement, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God, you shall love the Lord, and your neighbor is yourself. And he says to him, that's great, you answered that very well. And in Jesus, in verse 34 says, when Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, "You're not far from the kingdom of God." Now, then he's going to ask the group, while he was teaching the temple courts, he asked, "Why do the teachers of the law say that the Messiah is the son of David?" David himself, speaking by the Holy Spirit, declared, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at the right hand, I will put your enemies under your feet." David himself called him Lord. How then can he be his son? The large crowd listened to him with delight. As he taught, Jesus said, "Watch out for the teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes, be greeted with respect in the marketplace, have the most important seats in the synagogue, place and honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men will be punished most severely." So he talks to the scribe, and then he asks the question, why did David call his son Lord? And then he goes back to hitting the scribes. This guy, I assume this guy's still there, because this discourse, there's no end to this. He's just teaching. What do you think he's trying to do? What do you think? Do you think he has a message for this scribe that just talked to him in this discourse about watch out for the scribes? What do you think it is? In essence, among everybody else, he's telling the scribe, watch out for scribes. Because, and he describes why. Walk around in flowing robes, greeted with respect in the marketplace, have most important seats in the synagogue, place of honor at banquets, and then they devour widows' houses. They get, talk people out of their domiciles to, and it's kind of what cults do, you take over everything you have. What is he seeking, not just from scribes, but from this scribe?
Scribes and Pharisees knew the scriptures. They should have understood and been able to tell the people. And they weren't doing their job.
Right. Right. And I think that his attitude probably is like Paul's. I could offer my life for my countrymen. I mean, he really wants them to be saved. But to be saved, they have to confront that rather than accepting truth, they just double down on their error. They just hold to it and stick to it, et cetera, rather than having a discourse, rather than having two minds that come together and strive to find the truth together. Because I want you to see, because then he's going to lead into, and I'm going to come back, then he's going to come back to how is it that David called his son Lord? Now, guys, he's doing the same thing with them like he did with the rich young ruler, like he did with Nicodemus. This is a test, okay? Are you really going to be a disciple, or are you just going to come to me in the night under secrecy and then, hey, we're friends, or I really like you, or I like your teaching or whatever, but I'm not whole hog into this thing. He's not looking for associates. He's not looking for colleagues. He's not looking for students. He's looking for disciples. And so, and he's showing in that, again, here's what the Bible says, and you guys never picked up on it. That doesn't come from reading. Yes, Gwen. Exactly. Exactly. So, they're not even really disciples of God, are they? Because they are using God to get things. They're using God to get prominent places, have long flowing robes, all of that. They're not disciples of Him at all. Or, rather than reading the Bible, they'd study it. And they would scratch their heads and say, now why did David say this about his son? Why did he call his son Lord? And all he does is just quotes the scripture. So once again, you guys don't even know the Bible. Now, what does this say about Jesus? Knowledge. He knew the Bible. But Jesus' motivation was kind of different because his Father wrote this. Now, our Father did too, but we don't look at it the same way. God wrote Scripture. This is wisdom from his Father. I better know it. I want to feast on everything my Father has said. His motivation, of course, understand, he's got this ministry and all, he got the Messiah and all that stuff. But, you know, at age 12, he was showing how unique his desire, not just to learn, but, and what did he do with the rabbis? At 12, he astounded them. Because he can't just, it's not just quoting it. It's the questions that he asked. It's the sharing of what he had seen that was confounding. Because he was dedicated to that. All right, so the Lord said to my Lord, verse 36. And the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. The Lord said to my Lord, what's the issue? What's the core issue here? What is the problem inherent with Son of David? What's the falling off the right side of the bridge to try to keep from falling off the left side of the bridge with nothing wrong with the term. But what's the challenge that comes along with it, that it's a pit they have fallen into? What do you expect of the Son? If you're named after your father, if you have your father's name, what suffix do we put on it? Junior. Junior. So if a man has a son and the son has the same name, he calls him Junior, and then we refer to the father as Senior. Is there a problem in that? It's like in the New Testament, you have the least, Simon the least. How'd you like that name? Stephen the lesser. It's put down, isn't it? In a sense. It diminishes you. Junior diminishes you. Like Charlotte's older brother, Bobby, and I asked him one time, when are you going to stop being a Bobby and become a Bob? You know, because the IE is diminutive. That's a child. It's, you know, not always, but you understand my point. When are you going to become a Bob, you know? And now he's Bob. It wasn't because of me, but at some point he realized I need to get rid of the Bobby and become Bob. Because it's diminutive. IE is a diminutive, you know, it just means the lesser. And if you want to live your life as the less, that's fine. So what Jesus is having to deal with is who has supremacy, David or Jesus? Who has the supremacy? Jesus. Yet he's the son of David. That makes David supreme. Now, what else does that do? What are their expectations of the son of David? Say again? Yeah. Guys, we say chip off the old block. What does that mean? You're just like your daddy. And that's the expectation. If you call me son of Noel, you are reflecting on my father, and you're reflecting on how I reflect my father. Okay? And that's what they're doing with him. So this whole thing about his kingdom and the throne and all of that has to do with you're a chip off the old block. You're going to be a king like David. You're going to have a kingdom like David. You're going to be on the throne like David. Okay? The problem is, that's not who Jesus is. Is there a sense in which he's son of David? Absolutely. A sense. And so he asked them, why did David himself say, he's my Lord? How can a son be Lord? When the father is Lord of the household, he's Lord of the mansion, or, how can the son be Lord? He must be greater than I am. Okay. So the challenge that when they say son of David, absolutely true. He's of the lineage of David, and that was very important to being Messiah and the promise of Abraham and all of that. But there's a downside to that, because then David becomes the standard. David becomes the block that we chip the piece of wood off. And that's not who he is. And so he's going to tell him that, and he's going to ask in implicitly, why didn't you understand this? Why didn't you ask yourself? And so Bible study is to read a passage and to say, why did he say this? Why did he say this here? Why did he say this now? Not just read it and say, oh, that's interesting, etc. Or not just read it and say, okay, now I can quote it. It's studying it so that they should have been asking the questions. They should have raised their hands and said, all my life I've been studying this. Why did David call his son Lord? It doesn't make sense to me. And then he can explain it. But the challenge he has, and will continue to have in the rejection of him being the Messiah, is viewing him from the eyes of David rather than from the lineage of David. All right, verse 42. Any questions about that part? At some point, you take pride in being called the son or daughter of so-and-so, but at some point, you want to stand on your own. You want to be who you are, not just a chip off the old block. Verse 42, and a widow came, put in 2 small copper coins, which amount to a cent. Calling his disciples to him, he said to them, truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all the contributors to the treasury. For they all put in out of their surplus, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she owned, all she had to live on. Now, first question. Now, I want us to practice a little Bible study on just these verses. First of all, why do you think, and this is partially speculation, why do you think she gave everything she had? Now, before that, I want you to notice, here's the Bible study part. I want you to notice he didn't talk about her faith. He just talked about her example. Now, certainly there's faith involved in this. But what do you think her motive? What do you think she was trying to accomplish by giving her the last for her Social Security? That she needed to live on. And Jesus made that point. There you go.
That's what I would like to know. Because lots of times we do give a lot into something because we think it's important and that God will provide for us.
Yes.
Anyway, at least I hope it's not.
Okay. And I think it's probably dead on. And I think her faith is implicit. Now, it could very well be, hey, I've only got a penny left. What difference is that going to make? Let's give it to God. But he's pointing out her example. And I think the example is, and I think it's, guys, he contrasts her to those who give out of their bounty, which is how we give, isn't it? And this is rhetorical. You don't have to answer this, but when have you given what you needed to live on? When have you put yourself in desolation in order to give? That's what she's doing. Okay. Now let's go to the Bible study. What are some questions, as we read this passage, what are some questions that we can bring to it? I gave you one. What do you think she's going through? But let's try to understand this passage. What are some questions we can bring to it? Okay. And our definition of sacrifice has become pretty liberal, hasn't it? Our definition is from the overflow. That's not sacrifice. Sacrifice is when it hurts. Sacrifice is when you do without. Now, she's doing without her living. And my assumption is that is what you said. God's going to take care of me. I'm going to put myself, this is surrounding Jericho. This is Red Sea. I'm going to put myself in a perilous situation. Not to test God. It's totally different. But to honor him. And I'm going to watch and see what God does. Will he let me fall? And we all say, no, he's not going to let you fall. But when it comes to actually doing it, it's very different. And that's why he's pointing her out. A lot of people are giving money. A lot of people are giving a lot of money. But hers was very different because she gave all she had left. and so what we take away from that is we should be willing to give all that we have. Thank goodness he hadn't asked for it. Dave.
I will not give to the Lord that which costs me nothing.
There you go. David buying Araunah's threshing floor. When Araunah wanted to give it to his king, he wanted to honor his king. He wanted to take the sacrifice on behalf of David. David said, I will not accept your sacrifice, and then pass it on. I am not going to give out of a windfall. I'm going to give when it really costs me. Right. But she wasn't either.
In our society, it's not, and we don't know what those people are going to do with the money we give to them.
Exactly. They may go out and buy booze. Or
I don't know, it's a situation, I just said you're thinking, is there ever a situation when God would want me to do that? And if I really thought he wanted me to do it, I think I could do it. But, nowadays, it was so different back then. They actually gave to God. I don't know what the priests did with the money. Could have done bad things with it, too. Wasn't things different back then? Their giving back then?
yes and no.
Yes and no.
Well, one of the points of this, God didn't ask her to give this money either. Yeah, he didn't ask her to. There's nothing under the law that suggested this. I mean, she's in poverty. But she gave it. And I just want to point out, and guys, you're going to, if you're a disciple, you're going to wrestle with this your whole life. Is how much do I give? How much should I give? Have I given enough? Have I done my part? That's what disciples do. You wrestle. So it wasn't, he's looking at her example, and it's not how many in the crowd are willing to give, it's who actually did. Being willing to give is different than giving, isn't it? One is a mindset and the other is an action, okay? Now, you need to take from that. And guys, I think this is a metaphor. Remember, the whole context of this is, who are my disciples? And he's going to follow it with the teachings about he's going to follow it with, why does David call his son Lord? What does it mean to be a disciple? What does it cost? And what he was telling that one scribe is, you're close to the kingdom, and when you get rid of the robes, when you get rid of the desire for prestige, when you get rid of the chief seats, when you get rid of being honored, when you become humble and you submit and you become a disciple, you're in the kingdom. Now you're close, because your attitude to a certain extent is good. But again, we justify ourselves by the things that we have done. Christ looks in our heart to see at what we have withheld. With the rich young ruler, it was money. Now, the question with the scribe, we don't have the answer to the story. Did he go and get rid of those things? Because he was close. These are the kinds of people Jesus is looking for if they will take the last step. If Nicodemus would stay and learn about being born again and be born again, now guys, to do that, to follow Christ, he's going to give up the Sanhedrin. They're not going to have him anymore, okay? He's got prestige, he's got political power, he's got social power and all of that. And Jesus is basically asking him, will you follow me? Not just come and let's have, rabbi to rabbi discussions. I'm not seeking counsel, I'm seeking disciples. Are you going to be one? Same with the rich young ruler, same with the folks that he had fed. And he said, if you're going to truly be my disciple, and that's the words he said, if you're going to be my disciple, you've got to eat my flesh and drink my blood. And so they turned and walked off. Okay, question answered. It was a test. And we're going to talk about in the next hour what tests, let me give you another word for that, trials, what they're for. And what they are, tests demonstrate, is how much have you learned? How much have you known? How much have you integrated that now you can share? That's what a test is. Now, let's go back to this widow. Why didn't God remove her? Why didn't Jesus remove her from poverty? Why didn't he go and offer her whatever, reward? You have shown faith, or you've done a good thing. Here, let me fill your pot. Here, let me get you oil. Let me get you stuff to make bread and a pitcher of oil that never runs dry. Has God ever done that before? Yes. So he has the opportunity to do that. There is no indication he interacted, because you look at what he said. He was sitting across from the temple, and he was watching people put into the treasury. And they had kind of like ATMs where you would deposit the money and it would go into, on the outside of the building, and it would go into the inside, and that prevented theft, those kinds of things. But he's watching people put their money in. And please understand, some people put their money in so that people would see them putting their money in. And she came up and did this. And there's no indication he said a word to her, did anything for her, to her, etc. Why? Now, guys, now we're doing Bible study. Right. Right. Okay.
Are you really here?
Yes.
Really gonna do this? Because we're coming down to the nitty gritty. What is this? Is this Tuesday? This is Tuesday, right?
Wednesday.
Is this Wednesday?
Yeah.
So we, 2 more days.
Yeah.
We're getting close. And are you gonna run or are you gonna stay?
Now, guys, in our current culture, Jesus did a bad thing because he didn't rescue her. He didn't take her in. And we can't speculate anything beyond what it said. So my assumption is if he was trying to teach something different, we would have had a follow-up, that she would have been rewarded for her faith. That
What message would that be? I mean, the Jews have plenty of programs, right, for the widows. She's a widow. They have plenty of programs for the widow. What kind of message is that going to teach? She put everything in, and Jesus went over and gave her $100. Man, if I go put everything I in, put in, Jesus give me $1,000, right? And that's not the message she's trying to get across.
exactly. Now, when you add to it, their leaders are cheating widows out of their homes. It could very well be she gave her home. Again, that's speculation, but certainly she had that kind of heart. So yeah, what kind of message? This is not the message I want to teach, but I want to reiterate, guys, and compassion for everybody is very, very important. But giving folks what they need versus what they want or enabling or whatever. And again, this is, remember, I've told you going into this that if you've ever worked with benevolence, it's a constant struggle. When someone knocks on the door and says, I need gas or I need fuel because my significant other and I are homeless and it's very cold and we've run out of fuel for our heater, etc. It is, I don't know you, I don't know your background, I don't know your lifestyle, I don't know if, what you're going to do if I give you money to go or if I go buy you fuel, etc. It becomes a real challenge. What I want you to understand, from a cultural perspective, he failed her. Because it doesn't say he went over and said, here, take $100. And that's the cultural perspective of what Jesus was. He was healing the sick. He was feeding those who were hungry. And that's just taken as a blanket statement. He fed twice. That's all. Yes. So why did Jesus not see her poverty? Now she is totally penniless. She gave her last penny. She's penniless. What was that to Jesus?
He hurts for everyone. I can't imagine all of her pain that was on him when he was healed.
Right.
He hurts for everyone, but he knows what's going to happen next too. Is there any scripture that says
Absolutely.
what's going to happen next? I don't know. I have to study a little more, I guess.
Why didn't he take out his wallet and give her some money? How did he relate to this woman? She was penniless. Jesus was penniless. That's irrelevant. All I have is clothes on my back. How much money she has is irrelevant. Where she is on the social standing is irrelevant. What's relevant is her heart, her commitment, etc. And the knowledge you can't outgive God. The knowledge that if her desire was pure, and I assume it was, she is not going to starve to death. Yes. And he amazingly takes care of those who put their life on the line for him, not to test him. And you see, that's where people get hung up, is like the young man that was going to be a missionary to the island of natives that, y'all remember this a few years ago, that it was against the law to go because they had been totally isolated. When he came, they killed him because he didn't belong there, et cetera, et cetera. And he's doing the will of God, et cetera, et cetera. And I appreciate his heart. But when it comes down to, did God tell me to do this, or have I taken this on myself because I, this, that, or whatever? And he believed that God had led him to go speak to those specific people, which means somewhere along the way he got, in his mind, a revelation, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in that case, if God said do it, then, now I question whether he got that directive from God. But what I'm saying is sometimes we say, I'm going to give and see if God gives me a pony, you know. That's a test. I don't think she expected anything in response except the next day she was going to survive, and the next day she was going to survive. Not that God's going to give her a castle. And understand, because the Son of God didn't have a castle. The Son of God was penniless. She's his people. And what he had or didn't have was irrelevant. Actually, it was relevant in that it taught people. So, how did Jesus subsist? Have you ever thought about that? How did he live from day to day?
Well, that, yes, and the generosity of others, as they gave, and what he told his disciples, if they feed you good, if they don't, go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a day-by-day thing. In
Bingo.
America, it's, build up a inheritance.
Right.
Whatever, okay, that's fine. But it's a day by day, and it is just a day by day. Because when we die, somebody else is going to get our stuff.
Right.
You know.
It is day by day. It's having a day by day mindset, attitude. Yes.
I think we depend too much even on ourselves. I mean, I have never lived day to day without anything. It's always there. Mom and Dad were poor, but I never, never could. I don't know. I just think we depend. I don't know that any of, maybe some of y'all have experienced that. I've just never experienced it. So I don't know, but if you believe in God, then if I stay alive and stay here, God has something for me to do, and I just have to wait on it. If I'm not, if he takes me now, well, praise God for that.
Exactly.
Ready some days.
Dave? Right. Right. Because then the idea is I'm supported by you rather than God is working through you to take care of me. Guys, that's why he ate in the corners of the field. They went and ate as people in poverty went and ate. God had commanded, don't cut the corners of your field. Leave that for people who don't have anything. And that's where Jesus ate. When there was, may have shared this before, had an uncle visit. I was in my late teens. And Mom had 11 brothers and sisters that all lived in the Memphis area. And we were living in Houston or Dallas. And so we would always have to go visit them. And every once in a long while, 2 or 3 of those couples would come and visit us, and that was always a big deal. And my uncle was talking to me, and he said, are you a hunter like your dad? I said, I didn't know my dad hunted. And he said, your dad is an amazing marksman. Has he not taught you? And I said, my dad's never taken me hunting. He doesn't have a gun. I don't have a gun. What are you talking about? He said, you need to ask your dad. And so I asked Dad, how come you never took me hunting? And he said, when there was snow out, my dad would come to me with 4.22 bullets, and he would say, we need some squirrels or rabbits for breakfast or lunch or whatever. And he brought them to my dad because my dad was a good shot. He wouldn't waste those. That's the 4 bullets he had to get food for today. And I remember my dad saying, and when we had company, I always dreaded that because he would give me 6 bullets. And he's got to go out and find rabbits. He's got to go out and find squirrels. He's got to find something. But if he misses, they go hungry. You see what pressure that is? And Dad said he didn't have store-bought food until he was in the military. And first time he went to a restaurant and he got stew, he thought, this must be how the wealthy live. And he said, on the day I no longer have to go out and hunt something so we can stay alive, I have no reason to hunt. Now that's the subsistence we're talking about. That's depression days and all of that. But did God provide for them? And I asked Dad, how tough was it to find those squirrels and rabbits? And he said, son, when God knows you're depending on him, he rustles them. Did I have to work? Yes. But I would find rabbits when the next door neighbor didn't find rabbits, and it's not that I was a better hunter. I had a better provider. And I'm like, mind blown. All right. I want you to read this next chapter. It's very, very important because it's about, they're going to take him aside and say, when is all this going to come to an end? But I want you to be thinking about, have you ever left this building and looked at the outside of the building and say, isn't this great architecture? That's exactly what they're going to do as they're leaving the temple. Look at this temple. Aren't their stones amazing? Isn't the vestments of it, isn't this amazing? Why would you do that? I want you to be thinking. See, that's Bible study. I want you to go back and read it, and I want you to ask yourself, why would they say that? We don't do that. My, how marvelous. Do you ever leave your house and say, what a great, look at how they, you don't only do that. And this temple is central and all that. So why are they asking him or noting to him, isn't it great how the stones are? Isn't it great how this thing is built? And then he's going to turn around and say, it's all going to be destroyed. Read that, study it, and let's talk about that next week. Let's take a break.